Linguists have recently uncovered this psychological quirk about the modern workplace that is, frankly, it's just entirely unfair.
Oh, it really is. It's incredibly frustrating when you see the data on it.
Right. Because they found that if you take the exact same professional resume, the exact same background, the exact same human being, but you pitch them with just a 10% shift in their functional vocabulary.
Just 10%, a tiny adjustment.
Exactly. Just changing a few words can result in a 30% difference in their perceived salary value. 30%.
It's massive. And it's not because they learned a new coding language or got a master's degree.
No, not at all. It is simply because they changed the specific words they used to describe what they already do every single day.
Which I think really highlights the startling reality about how human beings process authority. We really like to think that competence just speaks for itself, right?
Yeah, the old put your head down and work hard mentality.
Exactly. We assume that if you just do excellent work, the people around you will naturally recognize your brilliance. But the truth is, in a fast-paced environment, literally nobody has the time or, frankly, the cognitive capacity to forensically examine your daily output.
They just don't. They're too busy with their own work.
Right. So they rely on heuristics. They rely on the linguistic cues you feed them to construct this avatar of your intellect and your value.
And that brings us to a scenario that I think literally every single person listening to this deep dive has experienced at least once.
Oh, without a doubt. It's universal.
You're at an industry gala, right? Or maybe a networking event, or you're sitting across the table in this really high-stakes cross-functional meeting. The ice water is clinking in the glasses, the ambient chatter is humming along, and then the person across from you looks you in the eye, they smile, and they ask that inevitable, deceptively simple question.
The dreaded question.
So what exactly do you do?
It is the universal panic button. I mean, you can actually measure a microscopic spike in cortisol when that question is asked.
Wow. Really a physical stress response?
Yes, the heart rate jumps just a fraction of a beat. Your body goes into a mild fight or flight mode.
That is so bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you do your job every single day. You are intimately familiar with it. You are objectively good at it.
You are the world's leading expert on your own job.
Right. But in that specific high-stakes moment, your mind just goes entirely blank. And you end up muttering something incredibly basic like, I answer a lot of emails, or I manage projects, or I look at data.
And then you walk away from the conversation replaying it in your head thinking, why did I just sound like a middle schooler trying to explain my own career?
Yes, it's so painful. So why does that happen?
Well, it's a profound and incredibly common frustration. We spend thousands of hours mastering our specific domains, building this incredible nuanced expertise. But we rarely, if ever, spend any time figuring out how to articulate that expertise to anyone outside of our immediate bubble.
And that is exactly what we are going to fix today.
Precisely. We are going to explore the underlying psychology of why we freeze up, and more importantly, we are going to reconstruct the exact lexicon you need to bridge that gap.
So the mission for us today on this deep dive is to completely transform how you, the listener, explain your professional life. We want to move you away from those basic, mundane descriptions so you can project absolute competence and executive authority.
Because if you are using elementary language to describe highly complex work, you are artificially suppressing your own professional value.
And I want to be very clear up front. What we are talking about today is not just a vocabulary lesson. We are not handing out a list of fancy, pretentious words for you to memorize so you can sound like, I don't know, a walking LinkedIn parody at your next dinner party.
No, please do not do that. That is the opposite of executive presence.
Right. This is a vital strategy for managing how your intellect is perceived by the people who matter.
Exactly. We are going to explore how to align the words you use with the actual tangible value you provide to an organization.
Okay, so let's unpack this foundational problem first. Why do we freeze? There is a fascinating psychological phenomenon that explains this exact mental block, right?
Yes. It is known in linguistic circles as the frustration of cognitive dissonance in professional articulation.
That is a mouthful. Cognitive dissonance in professional articulation. Break that down for us.
So the dissonance occurs when a professional possesses absolute mastery over their role. Like they know the intricate details of every system, every process, every nuanced political dynamic of their department.
They know exactly how the sausage is made.
Right. But when they are forced to explain it to a broader audience, they experience what psychologists call cognitive paralysis. They feel instantly reduced to using a first-grade vocabulary.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that cognitive paralysis, because it really feels like a glitch in the matrix. Why does translating complex domain expertise into articulate conversational language cause our prefrontal cortex to just hit a brick wall?
It comes down to the massive gap between knowing how to execute a function and knowing how to articulate its overarching value.
Okay, walk me through that.
Think about how the brain works when you are in the middle of a busy workday. When you are executing a task, you are completely in the weeds. Your brain is hyper-focused on the mechanical inputs and outputs.
Like opening the specific spreadsheet, running the SQL query, sending the follow-up email.
Exactly. Going to the 2 p.m. status meeting, your cognitive load is entirely dedicated to the mechanics of the job.
Right. You are in pure execution mode.
Yes. But when someone at a networking event asks what you do, they're not asking for the mechanics. They don't care about your SQL queries. They're asking for the meaning, the overall value.
I see.
So the paralysis happens because you are trying to translate mechanical actions into strategic value on the fly in real time. Without the right linguistic frameworks preloaded into your brain, the cognitive load is simply too high.
Your brain just short circuits.
Basically, yes.
The
brain panics and defaults to the simplest possible mechanical description. Instead of explaining the strategic impact of your data analysis, your brain just hands you the phrase, "I look at numbers."
I was thinking about this translation problem before we started, and it feels exactly like having the engine of a high-performance sports car, like this finely tuned, incredibly powerful machine humming under the hood.
Which represents your actual professional competence and intellect.
Right. But you are forced to steer the whole thing with a rusty pair of bicycle handlebars. The power is undeniably there, the engine is roaring, but your translation mechanism, your steering, is completely inadequate to handle the vehicle.
I love that.
If you try to take a corner at 100 miles an hour using bicycle handlebars, you are going to crash.
That is a phenomenal analogy because it perfectly highlights the mechanical failure of the translation. The bicycle handlebars represent that elementary default vocabulary.
You just cannot maneuver effectively through complex corporate conversations with it.
No, you can't. You are artificially limiting the power of the engine because the steering mechanism simply cannot keep up with the output.
And it must be even harder for people working in a second language.
Oh, absolutely. It is worth noting that for non-native English speakers operating in highly competitive global corporate environments, this cognitive dissonance is exponentially more pronounced.
I can only imagine.
They might have the exact, eloquent, highly strategic phrasing perfectly constructed in their native tongue, but they feel entirely constrained by the limits of their second language business vocabulary.
So the engine is a Ferrari, but the linguistic handlebars feel even more precarious.
Exactly. So how do we swap out the bicycle handlebars for a proper steering wheel? How do we fix this broken translation mechanism so that the outside world actually sees the Ferrari?
Right. Where we start?
To do this, we have to start at the absolute foundation, which means completely changing how we introduce our baseline professional identity. And this is where the psychology of language gets really fascinating.
I'm ready. Let's get into it.
It starts with your title. The most common mistake people make is what sociolinguists would call the stark declaration of a novice.
You mean when someone walks up and says, "Hi, I am a project manager," which, let's be honest, is exactly what 99% of the population does.
Yes, I am a financial analyst. I am a software engineer. I am an HR director.
It is the absolute default setting for human introductions.
It is. But a masterful communicator fundamentally avoids that stark declaration. They recognize that saying "I am a blank" is a linguistic trap.
A trap. How so?
Because instead, they immediately contextualize their title. They detach their core identity from the corporate label. Instead of "I'm a project manager," they say, "I operate as a project manager within the digital infrastructure division."
Or, "I currently serve in an advisory capacity for the marketing vertical."
Exactly.
I operate as rather than I am. I want to sit with that for a second because that simple shift feels massive.
It changes the entire dynamic.
It really does. It feels less like a barcode slapped on my forehead and more like a tactical deployment. It creates this professional distance.
Precisely. Let's analyze the psychological weight of why operate as or serve in an advisory capacity instantly elevates the speaker.
Let's do it.
When you say, I am a project manager, you are making a static ontological statement of identity. You are reducing your entire human existence in that moment to a corporate noun. You are the job.
That sounds vaguely depressing when you put it that way.
It is. But when you say, I operate as, you are using highly dynamic language. It shifts the listener's perception of you from a static employee sitting passively at a desk to a dynamic strategic asset.
An asset that has been deployed to operate within a much larger moving ecosystem.
Yes, it gives you a profound sense of agency. You are not just filling a seat, you are executing a deliberate function.
And I really love the second half of that phrasing too, within the digital infrastructure division.
The contextualization.
Right. You aren't just handing them your job title, you are handing them the architectural blueprint of where you fit into the grand strategy of the enterprise.
And critically, it establishes boundaries, which is a very subtle but powerful marker of executive authority.
Because it tells the listener, here is my specific domain of expertise and here is where it ends.
Exactly. But we need to push this even further. Once you establish that overarching context, that you are operating within a specific division, you have to describe what you actually do there.
Right, you have to explain the actual job.
And the first rule of elevated professional articulation is to completely, permanently discard the phrase, I am responsible for.
Oh man, yes. Because I am responsible for is the ultimate bicycle handlebar phrase.
It really is.
It sounds like you are describing chores.
Yeah.
I am responsible for taking out the trash. I am responsible for feeding the dog.
Exactly. Instead, we need to replace that phrasing with incredibly powerful, strategically weighty nouns, words like purview, mandate, and accountability.
Let's dissect the contrast here, because this is where that 30% perceived value increase really starts to take shape.
Okay, imagine a standard corporate introduction. The novice says, I am responsible for the departmental budget.
It is functional, it is accurate, it is entirely true.
But it is completely uninspiring. It sounds administrative.
So how does the master communicator articulate the exact same reality?
They say, fiscal oversight falls directly under my purview.
Oh man, fiscal oversight falls directly under my purview. That is just beautiful.
It hits differently, doesn't it?
If someone says that to me at a networking event, I am immediately assuming they make 3 times my salary. It sounds so incredibly authoritative. But why? What is actually happening beneath the surface of those words?
To understand why it works, we have to look at the sociolinguistics of the English language. Specifically, the divide between Germanic and Latin-based words.
Okay, history time. I love this.
English is a fascinating hybrid language. After the Norman conquest in 1066, the French-speaking elite ruled England.
Right, William the Conqueror and all that.
Exactly. So the royals and the courts spoke French, while the commoners spoke Old English, which was Germanic. Because of this historical divide, words with Latin or French origins inherently sound more aristocratic, more formal, and more authoritative to the English-speaking ear.
While the Germanic words sound more common and functional.
Precisely.
That makes total sense. It's like the difference between saying sweat versus perspire, or eat versus dine.
Exactly. So let's look at the phrasing, responsible for the budget. The word budget comes from an old French word for a small leather pouch used by common merchants.
Oh, wow. So it literally sounds small.
It does. Now look at the elevated phrase, fiscal oversight. Fiscal derives from the Latin fiscus, meaning the imperial treasury of Rome.
The imperial treasury. That is a massive upgrade from a small leather pouch.
And oversight implies a bird's eye view, a high-level vantage point of control and judgment.
And then you have falls directly under my purview.
Right. Purview has deep roots in formal legal and jurisdictional language.
So you aren't just doing math on a spreadsheet. You are governing a territory. You own a jurisdiction.
That is mind-blowing when you really break it down. By simply tapping into the Latin roots of the language, you are subtly triggering the listener's historical association with authority and governance.
Another example that struck me from the source material was replacing "my job is to cut costs" with "my primary mandate encompasses the optimization of departmental expenditures."
Notice how that completely shifts the tone.
It really does. It doesn't sound like you are just tracking receipts and nagging people about expensing too many coffees. It sounds like you are on a mission from the board of directors. A mandate sounds like a royal edict.
And that is exactly the goal. You are deliberately shaping the listener's perception. You are using linguistic cues to tell them, I am trusted with significant assets and I am empowered to make significant decisions.
Okay, so we have established this overarching mandate. You've mapped out your territory and your purview, but eventually you do have to talk about what you actually do all day.
The daily grind.
Right. How do you accurately describe the granular day-to-day actions of your specific domain without instantly slipping back into the elementary vocabulary?
This requires delineating your domain specifics through verbs of power. We can broadly categorize most corporate responsibilities into 3 main domains:
Which are?
interpersonal roles, analytical roles, and document or compliance roles. For each of these categories, there are strategic replacements for the basic verbs we default to when cognitive paralysis sets in.
Let's start with the interpersonal roles. This is for anyone dealing heavily with clients, stakeholders, internal teams, or vendors.
Basically, anyone whose job involves a lot of talking.
Exactly. The basic panicked instinct is to say, I talk to clients, or I help the sales team.
Which completely diminishes the strategic value of those interactions. You aren't just chatting about the weather or fetching coffee.
No, you are aligning business goals, you are negotiating terms, and solving complex human problems.
Right. We need to discard talk to and leverage verbs that denote strategic interaction and deliberate outcomes.
Give us an example.
For instance, instead of I talk to vendors a lot, you say, I liaise extensively with external vendors to ensure seamless supply chain integration.
Liaise extensively. That sounds immensely more intentional than I talk to them. It implies a structured, formal relationship rather than just randomly picking up the phone.
Or consider an internal role. Instead of saying, I help different teams get along, you say, I act as the primary point of contact, facilitating high-level stakeholder alignment.
Okay, hold on. I need to stop you right there because I have to play devil's advocate for a minute.
Go for it.
Facilitating high-level stakeholder alignment. When I hear phrases like that, a part of me instantly thinks of a completely useless middle manager.
The corporate jargon trap.
Yeah, the kind of guy in a quarter-zip sweater who walks around with a coffee mug all day, scheduling meetings about other meetings but doesn't actually produce anything tangible.
Right.
Is there a danger of sounding too corporate here? Like, how do we use these words without crossing the line into empty jargon?
It is a vital question, and it is the exact trap that insecure professionals fall into when they try to artificially upgrade their vocabulary without understanding the underlying mechanism.
They just start throwing around buzzwords.
Exactly, and it sounds hollow. But here is the critical distinction you have to internalize. This specific lexicon is not about using jargon to confuse people or hide a lack of output. It is about absolute surgical precision.
Precision over fluff.
Yes. Empty jargon words like synergy, paradigm shift, or ideation often lack a concrete mechanism. But facilitating stakeholder alignment is a highly precise description of a very difficult mechanical process.
Walk me through that. Prove to me that facilitating alignment isn't just corporate fluff.
Imagine a massive corporate merger. Company A has just acquired Company B.
Okay, high stakes.
The engineering team at Company A uses one software system, and the engineering team at Company B uses a completely different one. They both hate each other's systems, they are both defensive, and the integration is stalled, costing the parent company millions of dollars a week.
A total nightmare scenario.
If your job is to fix that, are you just talking to people? No. Talking is vague. What is the goal? When you say you are facilitating alignment, it tells the listener exactly why you are talking to them and the strategic outcome of that conversation.
You're defining the end game.
You are taking disparate, highly emotional viewpoints from fiercely competing stakeholders, systematically breaking down their objections, finding common ground, and guiding them toward a unified agreement so the business can function.
Ow.
That is a highly complex, emotionally taxing, and incredibly valuable skill. The language simply reflects the complex reality of the work.
That makes a lot of sense. The verb facilitate literally means to make an action or process easier. You are the grease in the gears of the organization.
Exactly.
If the gears are grinding, the machine breaks. Your job is to ensure the machine keeps turning.
Okay, I'm fully sold on the interpersonal verbs. Now, what about the analytical roles? The data scientists, the market researchers, the financial analysts.
The default phrasing here is usually I look at numbers or I run reports, which again sounds incredibly passive. It sounds like you are just staring at a monitor waiting for something to happen.
Or that you are just a human printer spitting out spreadsheets. It completely lacks intellectual agency.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are the strategic alternatives for the analysts out there?
We need to use verbs that imply transformation and rigor. Instead of, I look at data, you say, I synthesize raw market data into actionable strategic insights.
Oh, I like that.
Or, I conduct rigorous empirical analysis to forecast quarterly revenue trajectories.
Synthesizing raw data into actionable insights. I really love the mechanics of that phrase. It highlights the transformation process.
Yes, the alchemy of data.
You are taking chaos raw data, which is useless to a CEO, and you are processing it, filtering it, and turning it into something the company can actually use to make a decision. You are the translation layer between the raw math and the business strategy.
And pay attention to the modifiers used there. Rigorous empirical analysis. The word empirical carries immense psychological weight.
Where does that weight come from?
It derives from the Greek word for experience and observation, and in the modern mind, it is deeply tied to the scientific method. By utilizing the word empirical, you immediately establish intellectual trust.
It tells the listener, my methodology is sound, it is objective, it is verifiable, and you can rely on my conclusions to make multi-million-dollar decisions.
It is so much better than saying, I crunched the numbers and here's what I think.
Completely. Then we have the final category of roles, document, and compliance.
The legal teams, the quality assurance folks, the database managers, the cybersecurity analysts.
The novice in these roles usually says, I check documents, or I make sure we don't break the rules.
Which sounds like you are just proofreading for typos or acting as a hall monitor.
A hall monitor, that's exactly it.
It completely undermines the existential risk you are managing for the company.
Exactly. But the masterful communicator elevates this by focusing on risk mitigation and structural preservation. They say, I am tasked with ensuring stringent regulatory compliance, or I maintain the structural integrity of our internal databases.
Let's look at structural integrity. That is a phrase borrowed directly from civil engineering and architecture.
It evokes real weight.
If you say you maintain the structural integrity of a database, you are invoking the imagery of a bridge or a skyscraper. You are implying that without your constant, vigilant work, the entire system would buckle and collapse under its own weight.
You aren't just filing papers, you are the load-bearing wall of the entire department.
Exactly. You are structural.
So if we take a step back, what does this all mean? It means precision in describing your actions is vital for projecting competence. But here is where the dynamic gets even more complicated.
Because there's another layer.
Right. Precision in your actions isn't enough. You also need surgical precision regarding your place in the chain of command.
Yes, this brings us to the semantics of authority and collaboration. There is a vast semantic chasm between executing a task and holding ultimate accountability for it.
And mastering this specific linguistic distinction is arguably the most crucial skill for navigating corporate hierarchies and managing executive presence.
Because the stakes are so high.
They really are. If you overstate your authority in a meeting, if you sound like you are claiming credit for the whole project when you were just a contributor, you instantly sound arrogant, or politically naive, or totally out of touch.
You step on a lot of toes.
But if you understate it, if you use overly deferential language, you diminish your own value. You look weak, and the executives in the room will write you off as a worker bee rather than a future leader.
It is a linguistic tightrope walk. It is about linguistically differentiating your exact level of seniority. Let's look at the linguistic markers of the ultimate decision makers first.
The people at the top.
If you are the sponsor of the project, if you're the person who signs off on the budget, the person whose neck is literally on the chopping block if the initiative fails, you must utilize verbs of absolute authority to claim that space.
You want to use phrases like, I spearhead the initiative, or I orchestrate the deployment.
And my personal favorite, for pure executive gravity, I hold ultimate accountability for the project's success.
Hold ultimate accountability. That is heavy.
It is. And orchestrate is a particularly fascinating choice of verb. Think of an orchestra conductor.
Oh, that's a great visual.
A conductor does not play the violin, they do not blow the trumpet, they don't touch a single instrument during the performance.
They just wave a little wand.
Exactly, the baton. But they direct all the individual, highly skilled experts to create a unified, perfectly timed symphony. When you say you orchestrate a deployment, it implies high-level coordination of diverse, complex elements without needing to be in the weeds of every single task.
It says, I am managing the big picture.
Yes.
But let's be realistic here. Most of us, for the majority of our careers, are not the conductor.
True.
What if you aren't the director? What if you are the first chair violinist? Your role is deeply collaborative. You aren't the one with the final sign-off, but your specific expertise is absolutely crucial to the project's survival.
How do you describe that reality without sounding like just another interchangeable cog in the machine?
Exactly. How do you project power when you don't actually have the final authority?
This is where we use the language of strategic support. There's a brilliant phrase for this specific dynamic: ancillary support.
Ancillary support.
As in, I provide ancillary support to the executive steering committee. Or you can use active engagement phrases like, I am actively engaged in the architectural prototyping phase.
Ancillary support. I have to be honest, I am absolutely stealing that for my next meeting. It is such a beautiful, elegant piece of corporate diplomacy.
It really walks the tightrope perfectly.
It does. By using a word like support, you are clearly deferring to the primary leadership. You aren't stepping on your boss's toes. But the word ancillary sounds so technical and vital.
It implies that your contribution is an essential, specialized requirement.
The project literally cannot move forward without your specific piece of the puzzle. It is the ultimate professional humble brag. I'm not in charge, but the people in charge cannot survive without my ancillary support.
It is highly diplomatic, and it protects you politically while elevating you professionally. And this concept connects deeply to a much broader sociological observation about the modern workplace.
Which is?
Modern corporate structures are rarely siloed anymore. The days of sitting in an office with the door closed, entirely isolated from other departments, doing your one specific job, those days are largely over.
Oh, for sure. Everything is a matrix organization now. We are constantly embedded in cross-functional teams, agile squads, tiger teams, whatever the buzzword of the month is.
You have a boss in marketing, but you spend all day working with the developers.
Exactly. The structure of work has fundamentally changed, so your language must change to reflect it.
A mastery-level communicator does not just say, I work with other teams a lot. That sounds like a kindergarten report card.
Plays well with others.
Exactly. They recognize the inherent complexity of modern matrix business structures and frame their interactions accordingly. They use phrases like, my role requires fostering robust interdepartmental synergies, or I frequently collaborate with cross-functional cohorts to ensure holistic project delivery.
Cross-functional cohorts. Again, just listen to the difference there. It sounds so much more structurally organized than saying, I work with the folks over in marketing and engineering.
When you say cross-functional cohorts, it signals to the executives listening that you understand the architecture of the business, not just your specific desk.
It demonstrates that you possess a macro-level perspective. You see the bigger picture. You aren't just executing an isolated task. You are actively connecting the dots across the entire enterprise.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's review. We have the overarching context of our identity. We have the specific verbs of power to describe our daily tasks. We have the authority markers to define our place in the hierarchy.
The foundation is set.
But here is where the rubber really meets the road. How do we string all of this together when someone inevitably asks the most dreaded, open-ended follow-up question of all time?
Let me guess.
So, walk me through a typical day.
The daily routine question. It is a massive trap, and most people fall right into it.
Head first.
The primary rule here is explicit. You must avoid sounding like you are reciting a mundane grocery list of chronological tasks.
Because we all know exactly what that sounds like. Well, first I get in and open my emails. Then I answer the emails. Then I have a daily stand-up status meeting. Then I eat lunch. Then I look at a spreadsheet for 3 hours. Then I answer more emails.
It is excruciating to listen to.
And honestly, it is depressing to say out loud. It makes your life sound like a treadmill.
It sounds like a treadmill because it completely lacks narrative flow and strategic intent. It is merely a chronological recitation of mechanical actions. To answer this question effectively, you must understand the paramount importance of framing your day around strategic prioritization rather than the simple passage of time.
You need to tell a story about how you manage your energy and the company's resources.
Let's break down how to architect that narrative, because this is essentially a masterclass in structuring a response on the fly.
How should that story begin?
A strong daily narrative starts by establishing control over the chaos of the morning. You say something like, my day typically commences with triaging urgent correspondence and calibrating my priorities against our quarterly objectives.
Let's pause and really appreciate the architecture of that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Triaging urgent correspondence. You're not just reading emails.
We'll talk more about the word triage later, but it implies you are applying a strategic filter.
You're assessing urgency and deciding what requires immediate, life-saving intervention and what can wait. And then calibrating my priorities implies that your focus is not static.
You aren't just following a checklist blindly.
Your focus adjusts dynamically based on the strategic needs of the business that morning.
It frames the first 30 minutes of your day not as a chore, but as a high-level military briefing where you are surveying the battlefield.
I love that. Surveying the battlefield.
Then the narrative continues into the core execution phase. Subsequently, the bulk of my bandwidth is allocated to deep work tasks, such as drafting the technical specifications for the upcoming rollout.
Allocating bandwidth to deep work. This is a crucial concept. It signals to the listener that you are fiercely protective of your cognitive resources.
Yes.
You don't just react to interruptions like a ping pong ball. You intentionally carve out protected time for complex, high-value output.
And finally, you resolve the narrative by showing how you integrate your deep work back into the brighter team. The latter half of the day is generally reserved for interdepartmental touchpoints and aligning with my direct reports on tomorrow's deliverables.
Using interdepartmental touchpoints instead of meetings? That is a brilliant swap.
It changes the whole vibe.
The word meeting has become so toxic in corporate culture, it just evokes the feeling of hours lost in a windowless conference room listening to people drone on.
A touch point frames the interaction as brief, purposeful, and highly efficient.
When you put it all together, the entire narrative flows perfectly, from reactive assessment in the morning to deep, focused execution in the midday to the strategic alignment in the afternoon. It sounds like a perfectly architected day of a highly effective executive.
Now, obviously, that is the ideal narrative. But we have to address the reality of work, which is very often messy, unstructured, and deeply frustrating.
Right. We all know there are days where your cognitive stamina is heavily subsidized by 6 cups of coffee just to navigate endless logistical bottlenecks.
The chaotic days.
There is a massive burden in the modern workplace that we have to account for. The sheer volume of bureaucratic, non-value-adding work. I'm talking about the endless tide of email correspondence, the compliance forms, the status reports about the status report.
Busy work.
A lot of older corporate literature used to refer to this kind of endless repetitive work using the metaphor of Sisyphus.
Yes, the Greek myth. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to roll a massive boulder up a steep hill, only to watch it roll back down the moment he reached the top, repeating the action for eternity.
It was a classic metaphor for the email inbox.
You spend 2 hours aggressively responding, you hit inbox 0, you feel like a champion, you go get a coffee, and when you come back, there are 30 new unread messages waiting for you. The boulder has rolled back down the hill.
But honestly, I think the Sisyphus metaphor is a bit tired, and it feels a bit too dramatic for a modern office.
That's a bit theatrical, yeah.
When I think about all that administrative bureaucracy, a much more modern and accurate metaphor is the concept of technical debt in software engineering.
That is a much more functional analogy. Elaborate on how technical debt applies to daily administrative work.
In software development, if you are rushing to push a product out the door, you might write some messy, inefficient code. It works for now, but it's not sustainable. That is technical debt.
You're borrowing time against the future.
Exactly. Eventually, if you don't go back and spend time refactoring and cleaning up that code, the entire system becomes so bloated and fragile that it crashes under its own weight. That is exactly what our daily administrative work is.
It's operational entropy.
Yes. You have to spend time cleaning out the inbox, updating the CRM, archiving the dormant project files, and filing the compliance paperwork. It doesn't feel like real work, but if you ignore that administrative debt, the entire operational system of your job will eventually crash.
You won't be able to find anything, you'll miss a critical deadline, and the whole thing falls apart.
That is an incredibly powerful way to frame it, because it shifts the perception of administrative work from a personal annoyance to a systemic necessity. You aren't just complaining about paperwork, you are managing the operational entropy of the system to prevent catastrophic failure.
But what if your job isn't structured at all? What if you can't architect a neat little narrative about doing deep work at noon and having touch points at 3 p.m. because your job is totally unpredictable?
Think about an IT incident responder, a crisis PR manager, an ER nurse, or a supply chain expediter.
Jobs where the boulder is always falling on you.
How do you describe a day that is essentially just putting out random fires without sounding like you are running around like a headless chicken?
This requires a total cognitive reframe. If your day is chaotic by design, you do not describe the chaos. You describe your management of the chaos.
Well, that's good.
You do not say, my day is a total mess and I never know what's going to happen. Instead, you state that your operations are highly dynamic.
I love that pivot. I don't have a messy day. I manage highly dynamic operations. Sounds like you were running a special ops team.
Exactly. You explain to the listener that your specific responsibilities pivot contingent upon immediate operational crises, and that your role requires an elite degree of reactive problem solving.
Pivot contingent upon operational crises. That phrasing is pure gold.
It changes everything.
It takes the inherent unpredictability of a job and turns it from a perceived lack of structure or control into a massive positive. It highlights your adaptability, your resilience, and your cool head under extreme pressure.
It tells the listener, I am the person the executives call when things break. I am the rapid response asset.
It frames you as the solution to the chaos, rather than a victim of circumstance.
So to ensure that you, the listener, can seamlessly integrate this entire linguistic arsenal into your own professional life, we need to bring all these concepts together.
Yes, let's put it into practice. Instead of just listing out definitions, I want to construct a hypothetical high-stakes scenario.
Let's do a role play.
Let's role play how to utilize 6 specific, highly advanced terms, words that represent the pinnacle of corporate articulation. I want to see how they work together dynamically in the wild.
This is an excellent exercise. This is where we bridge the gap between knowing the vocabulary and wielding it effectively to control a narrative.
Okay, let's set the stage. Imagine I am a mid-level manager in a global manufacturing company. We are right in the middle of launching a massive new product, let's say a revolutionary new smart home device.
High stakes, lots of pressure.
But disaster strikes. The primary microchip supplier in Taiwan just got hit by a massive typhoon, and the supply chain is completely fractured.
Oh, wow. Okay. Worst case scenario.
The CEO calls an emergency war room meeting. Everyone is panicking. The CEO looks at me and says, "What is going on, and how are we handling this?"
And if you panic...
If I panic, I might say, "It's a mess. I'm trying to figure out who needs chips first. I'm talking to the Taiwan team. I'm too busy to do my normal work, and my brain is fried." That sounds terrible.
It sounds like you are drowning.
So, expert, guide me through this. How do I use our advanced lexicon to sound like a commanding leader in this crisis? Let's start with establishing my role in fixing this.
First, you need to establish your jurisdiction over the problem. You use the noun purview. You look at the CEO and say, navigating the supply chain disruption falls directly under my purview.
And as we discussed, purview invokes that legal jurisdictional authority. It tells the room, back off. I own this problem.
Exactly. Next, you need to demonstrate proactive leadership. You aren't just watching the disaster unfold, you are actively attacking it. Here, you use the verb spearhead. You say, I am currently spearheading the crisis response initiative to secure secondary silicon suppliers.
Spearhead. I want to pause on the etymology of that word because it's so evocative.
It's very visual.
A spearhead is the physical, sharpened metal point of the weapon. The wooden shaft provides the weight and the driving force, but the spearhead is the part that makes first contact with the enemy. It breaks through the armor.
Power leads the charge.
When I say I am spearheading the response, I am telling the CEO that I am at the very front of the phalanx. I am taking the hits, I am breaking the ground, and I am the first point of contact with the unknown.
It is a deeply visceral metaphor for proactive leadership.
Yeah.
Now, you have to explain how you are managing the different teams involved. You have engineering, you have finance, you have the Taiwan factory. They are all freaking out. This is where you use the verb liaise.
I am constantly liaising between the engineering department and our international logistics partners to find a viable workaround.
Perfect. And remember the diplomatic roots of the word liaison. A liaison is a military or diplomatic officer who connects two different armies or governments. By saying you liaise, you are implicitly acknowledging that engineering and logistics have completely different cultures, competing goals, and different priorities, and your role is to translate between them and negotiate a peace treaty so the product can launch. You are the diplomat in the war room.
Okay, so I've established my purview, I am spearheading the response, and I am liaising between departments.
Yeah.
But what about all the normal daily work I was supposed to be doing? How do I explain to the CEO that my regular projects are paused without sounding like I'm making excuses?
This is where you leverage the concept of bandwidth. You detach the issue from personal time management and frame it as a system's capacity issue. You say, given the severity of the supply chain fracture, I have reallocated all available bandwidth to this crisis.
And the genius of using bandwidth here isn't just the definition, which is the maximum rate of data transfer across a given path. It's the emotional detachment.
It removes the ego.
When you say, I don't have time, it sounds like a personal failure. It sounds like a weakness. But when you say, I have reallocated my bandwidth, you are framing yourself as a highly valuable piece of corporate hardware. A processor can only handle so many computations before it crashes. By using bandwidth, you remove the personal guilt from saying no. You're simply stating a mechanical fact about cognitive capacity.
It is a highly respected boundary. Next, you need to explain how you are managing the influx of terrible news and panicked emails. You need to show that you are not overwhelmed by the volume of information. This is where the verb triage comes in.
My team is actively triaging the incoming logistics reports to identify which product lines will be impacted first.
Let's delve into the history of triage because it explains why it carries so much emotional weight. It comes from the French verb trier, meaning to separate or sort.
But it gained its modern weight in battlefield medicine during the Napoleonic Wars and later in modern emergency rooms.
Triage is the brutal, high-stakes process of deciding which wounded patients need immediate life-saving care, which ones can wait, and which ones are beyond saving.
And applying that literal life-or-death medical concept to a corporate inbox or a supply chain report is an incredibly brilliant move. It instantly communicates high stakes and cold, rational, strategic assessment.
It shows you aren't panicking.
When you triage an inbox, you aren't just reading chronologically from top to bottom. You are scanning for the arterial bleeds, the absolute critical failures, and addressing those first while leaving the minor scrapes for later. It proves to the CEO that you do not treat all information equally. You are highly decisive and value-driven under fire.
Finally, you need to explain how you are going to prevent your team from burning out during this crisis. You need to address the structural inefficiencies. You use the phrase administrative overhead. You say, to ensure we move as fast as possible, I am temporarily suspending all routine status reporting to reduce the administrative overhead on my logistics team.
That is the technical debt we talked about earlier. By calling it administrative overhead, you identify the inefficiency without sounding like a whiny employee who just hates paperwork.
You sound like a systems architect.
You sound like a structural engineer optimizing a system for speed. You are framing the mundane tasks as a structural cost that needs to be minimized.
Look at the narrative you just built in that hypothetical war room. Navigating this disruption is my purview. I am spearheading the response, liaising with logistics, reallocating my bandwidth, triaging the critical failures, and reducing administrative overhead to move faster.
It's bulletproof.
If you string those concepts together in a high-stakes moment, the perception of your competence and leadership potential does not just increase by 30%, it skyrockets. You instantly become the most commanding voice in the room.
It fundamentally shifts the entire dynamic of how you are perceived by stakeholders. You aren't just managing a crisis, you are managing the perception of the crisis.
Which brings us to the final challenge of our deep dive today. We have spent an hour dissecting the mechanics of language, but knowledge is useless without application. We want to turn the focus entirely back to your own professional trajectory right now.
We want to issue a direct challenge to you, the listener. Take a moment today, perhaps right after this deep dive ends, while you are driving or making coffee, and mentally articulate your own overarching narrative using this advanced lexicon.
Audit your own language.
Look at your current job title and ask yourself, how do I actually operate? What is my overarching purview? Are you currently protecting your bandwidth effectively? Or is your cognitive processor completely bogged down by the operational entropy of administrative overhead?
Are you spearheading new initiatives, or are you strategically providing crucial ancillary support to a larger ecosystem?
The central thesis of everything we have discussed today is profound. Your articulation is a direct reflection of your intellect in the eyes of others.
It is not enough to simply be smart, or to be highly skilled, or to work 70 hours a week. The reality of the corporate world is that elevating your vocabulary directly and tangibly elevates your professional trajectory.
It shapes how your competence, your leadership potential, and your strategic vision are perceived by the executives who make decisions about your career, your promotions, and your compensation.
If you sound like a leader, you will be treated like a leader. You upgrade your words, you upgrade your image.
But here's where I want to leave you. I want to throw one final lingering question out there, something that extrapolates from everything we've just discussed. And it dips into one of my favorite linguistic theories.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
We have spent this entire time establishing that elevating your vocabulary changes how others perceive your intellect and authority. We've focused heavily on the external perception.
Yes, the external projection of competence.
But consider the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It's a concept in linguistics, also known as linguistic relativity, which suggests that the structure of a language actually shapes the speaker's cognition and perception of the world.
Put simply, the words you use dictate how you are capable of thinking.
So, if language shapes reality, does speaking about your own work with terms like mandate, purview, and spearhead actually rewire your own internal psychology?
That is a deeply fascinating proposition, a self-fulfilling linguistic prophecy.
Right. Think back to the opening metaphor.
Yeah.
If you spend years internally telling yourself you are just steering a rusty bicycle, you will inevitably ride through your career like you are on a bicycle.
You will play small.
You will avoid taking up space. But if you wake up tomorrow, look in the mirror, and intentionally tell yourself, fiscal oversight falls directly under my purview. I am spearheading this division. I am the vital ancillary support for this enterprise. Could simply changing the words you use to describe your job inherently transform you?
It's a powerful thought.
Could the physical act of sounding authoritative externally actually rewrite your internal neural pathways, turning you into a more confident, strategic, and authoritative professional from the inside out? Are we just changing the paint job on the car, or are we fundamentally upgrading the engine?
That is the real question.
It is something for you to mull over the next time someone looks at you across the table and asks, "So what exactly do you do?"
Why is it that the professionals who work the hardest, the ones who just put their heads down and absorb the most tasks, why do they almost never make it to the C-suite?
It's a great question, and I mean, you see it all the time.
Right. You have two professionals doing the exact same caliber of work, and one just gets stuck in the exact same role for a decade, slowly burning out.
Yeah, well, the other one is just totally fast-tracked.
Yeah.
They get the resources, the promotions, the respect.
Exactly. And I think we often assume the secret to that fast track is just like raw output. But the research we are diving into today looks at something completely different. It's about the exact vocabulary separating middle management from elite leadership. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled you're here with us.
Yeah, we're really excited to get into this one. So the module we are analyzing today is called Mastering the Language of Executive Value and Boundaries.
Right.
And the central thesis here is that your career trajectory isn't dictated solely by what you do, but by the precise linguistic frameworks you use to communicate the value of what you do.
I love that. So our mission for this deep dive is to transform how you advocate for your time, how you prove your absolute worth, and how you signal to the decision makers around you that you are actually ready for that executive level.
And the most surprising part of this source material is that this transformation doesn't require, a new degree or suddenly working a 60-hour week.
Right. Thank goodness.
Yeah, it really just hinges on shifting a few highly strategic phrases.
Okay, let's unpack this. I mean, where do we even begin with this toolkit?
Well, we have to start by neutralizing the single greatest threat to your professional bandwidth. And what's fascinating here is that the source material identifies this threat, not as a loud, dramatic failure or, a missed deadline.
Right.
It's actually identified as a silent structural killer known as scope creep.
Oh man, scope creep. That's the term that gets thrown around in project management constantly. Usually it's referring to a client just adding feature after feature until a project is completely derailed. But the way this module applies it to daily professional life is just so insidious.
It really is insidious because it operates completely without formal recognition. I mean, in a human resources context, scope creep is this phenomenon where your job responsibilities continuously and informally expand.
Right, they just keep growing.
Yeah, far beyond your actual job description. So you end up absorbing the labor of your peers or even other departments. But, and this is the key, there is no corresponding increase in compensation and no title change.
It's like going to a cafe, right? Yeah. And you order a simple black cup of coffee. But instead of handing you a cup, the barista just smiles, hands you a bag of flour, a carton of raw eggs, and some sugar, and just cheerfully waits for you to bake them a massive cake.
Yes, that analogy captures the core dilemma perfectly.
Right, because you're just standing there holding eggs.
Exactly. When a colleague approaches you with the flour and the eggs, a task that is unequivocally not your responsibility, You are suddenly trapped in this binary choice that feels basically impossible to win politically.
Right, because if you passively accept the ingredients, you bake the cake. I mean, you absorb the labor, your own actual work suffers, and you burn out.
There you lose.
But if you bluntly say, hey, I ordered coffee, baking a cake is not my job, well, suddenly you look like the villain.
Oh, absolutely. In a corporate setting, saying that's not my job is a massive faux pas.
It really is. It destroys team cohesion and paints you as just totally uncooperative.
And that binary trap is exactly where novice communicators fail. They either surrender or they fight. But the C-suite communicator uses a third option.
A third option.
Yeah. The source material emphasizes setting an ironclad boundary wrapped in what they call velvet diplomacy.
Velvet diplomacy. I like that.
It's very effective. You achieve this by leaning into the concept of optimal resource allocation. So the specific linguistic pivot provided in the module is to say, I must defer to the specific expert or department on this matter.
Oh, wow. So instead of an outright rejection, you basically pivot the responsibility.
Exactly.
So if someone asks you to review like the legal jargon in a contract and you are in marketing, you don't say, I don't do legal.
No, you definitely don't say that.
You'd say something like, while I recognize the urgency of this deliverable to ensure optimal risk mitigation, I must defer to the legal counsel on this matter.
Perfect. Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychology behind the word defer is incredibly potent. Deferring is fundamentally an act of professional respect.
Oh, I see.
Right. It strokes the ego of the functional expert you are pointing them toward while entirely removing you from the equation.
That is so smart.
You are actively solving the requester's problem by redirecting them to the correct channel, but without absorbing a single ounce of the labor yourself.
Okay, well, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Because redirecting a peer in marketing to someone in legal is one thing. That's horizontal communication. You have the political capital to deflect a peer. But what if this inappropriate out-of-scope task assignment comes directly from your boss?
Right.
I mean, from a senior director. You can't just look at the person who literally writes your performance review and say, I defer you to another department.
That is such a crucial point, and it raises an important question. The material actually explicitly differentiates between horizontal boundary setting and managing up.
Okay, good.
When the scope creep comes from a superior, velvet diplomacy has to evolve into what the source calls the prioritization paradox.
The prioritization paradox. Well, a paradox implies two contradictory truths existing at once.
Exactly. In this scenario, the paradox is that you are saying no by enthusiastically saying yes.
Wait, how does that work?
You force the executive choice back onto the manager. So the exact phrasing recommended by the module is this: I am absolutely amenable to absorbing this new initiative. However, my bandwidth is currently fully allocated. Which of my current deliverables should we deprioritize or pause?
Oh, man. The word amenable is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting in that sentence.
It really is.
It signals total compliance. You are demonstrating this enthusiastic willingness to be a team player. You aren't being hostile at all.
Not at all.
But by immediately following it up with a request for reprioritization, you are basically forcing your manager to confront the logistical reality of the situation.
You're neutralizing the power dynamic by making it an operational math problem. I mean, think about it. A manager's actual job is to prioritize finite resources to achieve maximum output.
Right.
When they casually toss extra tasks onto your plate, they are abdicating that responsibility. The prioritization paradox politely forces them to do their actual job. They have to actively decide that task A is more important than task B.
And it prevents you from looking incompetent when things inevitably slip. Because, if you just accept the new task and try to do both, you will fail at both.
Exactly. And the manager will just blame you for poor time management.
Yeah, they'll say you should have spoken up. So by making them choose what gets paused, you share the accountability for that paused project.
Yes, the logistical boundary is secured. But this creates a natural consequence that leads us right to the next pillar of the source material.
Okay.
If you are constantly and successfully deferring tasks to protect your bandwidth, you are fundamentally doing fewer miscellaneous things.
Which means executives might start looking at you and wondering what you actually do all day.
Exactly.
I mean, if you aren't the person running around putting out every single little fire, how do you prevent your ironclad boundaries from looking like laziness? Because that is a real risk, right?
It's a huge risk.
You protect your time, but now you have to walk into a performance review or a salary negotiation and prove the undeniable value of the work you actually kept on your plate.
And this transition is where we see a catastrophic error in how professionals advocate for themselves. They walk into a review and they essentially recite a syllabus of their daily activities.
A syllabus.
Yeah, they say things like, I answered 500 client emails, I updated the quarterly spreadsheets, I organized the software.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because reciting your daily tasks is it's like going up to a renowned food critic and saying, look at how well I chopped these vegetables. I spent 3 hours just chopping them.
That's a great way to put it.
The critic doesn't care about the prep work. They just want you to serve them the Michelin star meal.
Exactly. And the psychology of the executive listener is totally critical here. Executives operate under massive cognitive load. They just do not have the mental RAM available to hear your list of tasks and independently translate that into business value.
Right, they're too busy.
If you give them a list of chopped vegetables, they will evaluate you as a prep cook. They care exclusively about how your actions impacted macro business objectives. Things like revenue generation, cost reduction, or risk mitigation.
So if reciting tasks is the trap, there has to be a structural way to rephrase our daily grinding so that executives actually hear the value. How do we do that translation for them?
The module outlines a framework for this called the metric pivot.
The metric pivot.
Yes. You must bind your granular actions to tangible, high-level metrics. You have to change your vocabulary from being task-oriented to impact-oriented.
Okay, give me an example.
So instead of saying, I organized the supply chain software, which sounds very administrative.
That was administrative.
Right. You elevate it to, I audited our logistics, yielding a 15% reduction in overhead costs.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the shift from the word organized to audited instantly changes the perceived gravity of the work.
It does.
Anyone can organize a file cabinet. But an audit implies this rigorous strategic analysis and then attaching it directly to a percentage, like a tangible reduction in overhead. It translates your effort into the universal language of business, which is numbers.
Spot on. And to reinforce that translation, elite communicators heavily lean on a specific idiom. They constantly talk about moving the needle.
Moving the needle.
Yes. You don't just complete a project, you state, this initiative moved the needle on our Q3 client retention.
I love that. Moving the needle is such a kinetic phrase.
It is, yeah.
It basically implies that the business was totally static and your specific intervention created momentum. You aren't just, a cog spinning in a machine.
Yeah.
You are the force actually driving the machine forward. It
Right.
proves your return on investment to the company.
Exactly. It proves that your presence is economically justified. But, and this is but proving you are valuable in your current role is very different from proving you are capable of holding a higher title.
Right. Because moving the needle secures your current position, and sure, it justifies a raise. But if you, the listener, are eyeing a C-suite position or, say, a senior director role, the language has to evolve again. Being great at your current job doesn't automatically mean you are ready to lead the entire department.
No, it definitely doesn't.
So what is the specific rhetoric that signals you belong in that upper echelon before you even have the title?
To signal that readiness, headhunters and executive recruiters look for candidates who utilize what the source calls the catalyst narrative.
The catalyst, okay.
Right, so think about a catalyst in chemistry. It accelerates a reaction between disparate elements. In corporate linguistics, you must describe yourself as the vital bridge between two entirely different worlds within the company.
I see.
The exact phrase the module provides for this is absolute gold. You articulate your core value as translating macro-level executive strategy into micro-level tactical execution.
Oh, that is good. Because we all know the basic definitions here. Strategy is the vision, the long-term blueprint drawn up by the board. And tactics are the boots on the ground, the granular mechanics required to actually build the blueprint.
Exactly.
The issue isn't knowing the difference between the two. The real issue is the massive communication breakdown that usually happens between the boardroom and the floor.
And that breakdown is basically inevitable because those two groups speak entirely different languages. The boardroom speaks in multi-year projections of market share.
Right.
The floor speaks in daily quotas and software limitations.
All right.
So by framing yourself as the translator, the catalyst, you are explicitly telling the board that you comprehend their high-level visionary language perfectly.
But you haven't lost the mechanical ability to communicate with the people who actually have to execute it.
Exactly.
You are the bilingual leader. I love the theory behind that, but let's look at the reality of ascending to that level for a second.
Okay, sure.
Because if a leader's ultimate goal is to move entirely into the realm of strategic oversight and totally abandon tactical execution, if they literally stop doing the mechanical work, doesn't that run a massive risk?
Yeah, to me.
Doesn't that make them sound like an out-of-touch ivory tower boss? You know, the kind of executive who just dictates from above and has basically forgotten how the actual business runs?
What's fascinating here is that your pushback perfectly illustrates why novice managers fail to become elite leaders.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The fear of looking like an ivory tower boss is exactly what causes middle managers to cling to tactical execution. They try to prove they still do real work by sounding like micromanagers.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
They use phrases like, I check my team's work daily, or I oversee all their granular tasks.
Which is universally despised.
Totally.
I mean, no high-performing professional wants to work under a micromanager. It stifles creativity and just completely kills morale.
It does. Elite leaders recognize that at the highest levels, you are no longer managing tasks. You are managing capacity and culture.
Capacity and culture.
Yes. They bypass the micromanager trap by framing their leadership style through a concept the source calls the beautiful duality.
The beautiful duality. That sounds very poetic. What is it?
It's empowerment and succession planning. When they step away from tactical execution, they never frame it as passing the buck. They frame it as fostering autonomy.
So what does this all mean? I mean,
Right.
fostering autonomy totally reframes the act of delegating, doesn't it?
It does.
You aren't just dumping your busy work onto your direct reports so you can go play golf. By intentionally delegating the tactical execution, you are actively empowering your team to cultivate their own problem-solving acumen.
The psychology is brilliant. It satisfies the ego of the direct report, who feels trusted with real responsibility,
Right.
while simultaneously freeing up the leader's bandwidth to focus exclusively on the strategic horizon.
It's a structural win-win. The team gets smarter and more capable, and the leader isn't bogged down in the weeds. But if the leader is entirely focused on the horizon, what exactly are they looking for?
That is the big question.
Right. If they aren't managing the daily grind, what is their ultimate deliverable to the board of directors?
And this brings us to the final and honestly arguably most important pillar of executive communication in the module.
Yeah.
The ultimate deliverable of an elite leader is cultivating a talent pipeline.
A talent pipeline.
Yes. The source uses a tremendously powerful phrase for this. Elite leaders tell the board their primary objective is to future-proof the organization.
Wow. Future-proof the organization. That phrase carries so much weight.
It really does.
It completely reframes the whole objective of leadership. It's no longer just about hitting this quarter's numbers. It's about institutional longevity.
Exactly. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, why does a board of directors actually care about future-proofing?
I assume because of risk?
Precisely. Their primary mandate is risk mitigation. The greatest risk to any department is key person dependency.
Ah, right.
If a department is entirely reliant on one brilliant manager holding everything together, the board is terrified. Because what happens if that manager leaves or gets sick?
The whole system just collapses.
It collapses.
Right. A system that requires a hero to function is basically a fundamentally broken system.
Yes.
So by telling the board, you are building a talent pipeline, a proactive pool of internal candidates who are ready to step into leadership roles, you are actively de-risking the department.
You are demonstrating unparalleled foresight. You are architecting a machine that sustains itself, regardless of who sits in the chairs.
That's incredible.
And paradoxically, by building a pipeline of people who can do your job, you make yourself infinitely more promotable. I mean, think about it. A company cannot promote you to the C-suite if your current department will literally burn to the ground the moment you leave it.
That makes total sense. You have to build your own replacements to clear your own path upward.
Exactly.
Man, this has been an incredibly eye-opening journey through the linguistics of power.
It really is a paradigm shift.
Yeah. We started at the foundation, protecting our time and navigating the silent killer of scope creep. We learned to use velvet diplomacy, deferring to experts to preserve relationships, and deploying the prioritization paradox to force our managers to acknowledge the reality of finite bandwidth.
We did.
Yeah.
And then we explored the critical transition of proving our return on investment.
Right.
We moved away from the fatal flaw of reciting those daily task lists and instead utilized the metric pivot to bind our actions to macro objectives, really proving to the executive suite how we actively move the needle.
And finally, we decoded the elite language of strategic leadership, stepping away from the weeds of tactical execution to become the catalyst.
Yes.
Fostering autonomy in our teams, and ultimately future-proofing the organization through robust talent pipelines. I strongly encourage you, the listener, to take just one of these linguistic pivots, whether it's the prioritization paradox with your boss or the metric pivot in your next review, and just test it out in your very next professional interaction.
You should definitely try it.
Pay close attention to how the power dynamic in the room shifts in your favor.
The shift in how you are perceived will be almost immediate. But, before we conclude this deep dive, this raises one really important question, a final thought to leave you with, based on today's analysis.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the true hallmark of an elite C-suite executive is future-proofing the organization, if their highest mandate is cultivating a talent pipeline that fosters total autonomy,
Yeah.
could it be that the ultimate test of your leadership isn't actually how well your team performs when you're standing in the room directing the traffic,
Oh.
but whether your department could flawlessly execute its strategic vision if you simply never showed up to work tomorrow?
Oh, wow. If you do your job perfectly, you basically make yourself entirely obsolete to the daily operations.
Exactly.
And that is the exact moment you finally hold the key to the executive suite.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive into the language of executive value. We will catch you on the next one.
Until next time, keep leading.